The religious insist that God doesn't owe you anything. You just have to kiss his ass because, well, bald rationalizations mostly. Bald rationalizations and childish fear. That's all religion is, after all, and we're going to take a look at some more of that today because, really, what else can we do? Expect someone with a brain? Yeah, not among the religious. Certainly not. We're going to do a video from a channel called Jesus Focused, and sadly it's not remotely focused on reality because then maybe it wouldn't be getting trashed so badly. Not that the religious tend to care because they're all only in it for the feels, but it's just got to be pointed out how badly it's actually doing. They'll never listen, and we probably shouldn't expect them to, but that's why religion is going the way of the dodo. So let's get into it, and I'll see you on the other side.
Why should I believe in God? He hasn't done anything for me.
Now, right off the bat, and I think that anyone who has ever seen the religious playbook in action, you'll already know what's coming, but the religious simply start with the preconceived notion that their gods are real, their gods, not any others, just theirs, because they can't even conceive of the notion that they're not right up front. So every video that you see, especially the ones ostensibly addressing atheists, which this one really has to, they're starting from the position that no atheist starts from because they don't actually care about atheists. They don't understand atheism at all. They're just really trying to stroke the egos of the already religious because if they understood atheism at all, which clearly they don't, then they wouldn't do what they do, would they? They'd actually be able to present evidence to support their side. This video claims to be able to do that, which I think we all know they can't, but hey, I'm willing to give them a shot if you are. So let's go back and see.
If he's real, let him show me. How many times have you heard or even thought this yourself?
Plenty, because that's what rational people do. Now, I don't expect a real God to show up on my doorstep with evidence or anything. I mean, that would certainly be nice, but I don't really expect that. If that was going to happen, I figure it would have already happened by now. It's entirely on the shoulders of those who believe this stuff to back it up to my satisfaction, or at least if they expect me to believe it too, then that's really what they need to do. And we already know they're not even trying to do that. So I honestly don't expect much here, but at least if and when they pretend to present evidence, I can show why it's not really evidence. There's always a point in every theist presentation where they take a massive unwarranted leap to, therefore God. Yeah, let's see how long it takes him to get there because I'm sure he will. Place your bets down in the comments and we'll see who's right.
Today we're diving into the dangerous mindset of expecting God to prove himself to us. Spoiler alert, God doesn't owe us anything, and he's already left more proof of his existence than we could ever imagine.
Bet you're wrong. But no, I wouldn't say God owes anyone anything because there's no reason whatsoever to think that any gods exist at all. You don't just get to assert it, you don't just get to assume it, you have to be able to prove it, and let's be honest, he's not going to be able to. He's not even going to give it a good faith effort. This is going to be a half-assed attempt at coddling the fifis of the believers because atheists will simply not be impressed. Oh, but you're biased. No, I'm not. That's you. Because the religious are willing to go through absurd leaps of illogic to get to their imaginary friends. They just really want it to be true, but that doesn't make it true. You need to have evidence every step of the way, and as we unfortunately know, they take 2 steps and then leap to, see, I told you God was real. But that's not how it works. So, with the obvious fail incoming, let's see where he goes. I'd love to be proven wrong for once, but it never seems to happen, does it?
Let's get real. This mindset comes from a place of pride.
No, That's you. The projection is strong in this one. The religious really love to think that they're the bestest buddies with this all-powerful creator of everything. I mean, no evidence provided or anything, but that's really all it is. It's ego. It's also a lot of fear. The religious are some of the most terrified people around because they are scared of literally everything. They invent this magical man in the sky to allay their fears, and then they're terrified of that imaginary god. That's kind of messed up, isn't it? These people have serious emotional problems. Let's not kid ourselves.
It's the ego that says, God, you're on trial here. Convince me you're worth believing in.
I mean, couldn't we be saying that for everything? That's basic rationality. But the religious are terrified of that, aren't they? They don't want to be rational. They're scared of being rational. They're scared of being skeptical. It gets in the way of their emotional high and their bald rationalizations, because they really want the world to be a particular way. They have no reason to think that it is that way. Much to the contrary, it certainly isn't that way, but they really like the idea, don't they? As I keep saying, they are just immature children that refuse to grow up, living in adult bodies. You have no choice in the world that you're actually in. It is what it is, whether you like it or not, but they figure that if they just close their eyes and wish hard enough, suddenly they'll be in control. Of course, that scares them too, so no, it's not them. It's something that they've just made up as a stand-in. That's what's really going on here. And it's sad that they can't figure it out, because the rest of us certainly can.
But the Bible tells us the truth. Who are you, a human being, to talk back to God, as stated in Romans chapter 9, verse 20?
My book says a thing. Why do they think that that means anything at all to atheists? Oh, right, they're not talking to us, are they? This is the problem. They're really emotionally attached to their religious fantasies, and because they're not intelligent enough to just let that go and just embrace objective reality, they have to assume that everybody else is just like they are. And no, they're just wrong. We are nothing like you. We're better, we're smarter, we're more rational. Figure it out.
Imagine standing before the creator of the universe and demanding that he entertain us with miracles as if he's some performer on stage.
I'm not going to just imagine things for which there is no objective evidence. I have no reason whatsoever to think that any God is even a remote possibility. Imagine you're standing before invisible, intangible, universe-creating pixies. Yeah, that's stupid. So no, let's not imagine that until you can actually provide evidence that it's factually true, or that it's even factually possible. I'm willing to go with that. You can't just start from your emotionally comforting fantasies. You have to begin with objective reality and provide evidence for anything else. Give it a shot. I know you won't because you don't care, but that's why people laugh at you. And while I'm here, this video, at the time that I'm writing this at least, it has had 4 upvotes and 48 downvotes. So you can see how well this is going over, right?
That's the ego speaking loud and clear. Let's pause and look at the world around us. God's fingerprints are everywhere.
That's, pretty close to, look at the trees, right? How do you know that? Not what do you believe, because nobody cares what you believe, but how do you objectively discover God's supposed fingerprints? Because you can't. You can't prove God is real at all. Or at least he hasn't done so yet. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. But until he can do that, nobody is going to be impressed with any of this stuff at all. Because a Hindu could just replace God with Brahma. Look at Brahma's fingerprints. Sorry, not impressed. Same with any other god out there. Same with anything out there. Come back when you have evidence, not just faith. But then we'd never hear from them again, and Somehow, I don't really think that's a bad thing, do you?
From the vastness of the stars in the night sky to the intricate design of a single flower.
None of which proves God done it. You're starting from something you cannot demonstrate is real just because you really like the idea. That doesn't make it real. But this is as far as he'll go, right? I'm right because I really want to be right, so there. But that doesn't mean you're right, because the aforementioned Hindu, they could do exactly the same thing and say that they're right too. In fact, every single religion that has ever existed could say, look at the trees, that proves my God is real. No, it doesn't. That proves absolutely nothing. It proves nothing remotely of the sort. You're just making yourself look dumb. It just proves you're an idiot for believing any of this unsupported slop. The only way to prove that God done it is to prove that God is real first. Then you can provide evidence that this real God that you've already established actually did anything. And they're not even trying to do that. We can't just let them go for a jog with the goalpost strapped to their back, because that's simply not how any of this works.
Creation screams of God's existence.
It does nothing remotely of the sort, since you haven't established that there was a creation to begin with. This is argument by assertion, nothing more. Of course, I don't think we can be surprised by this, because what else can the religious really do? This is the top of their game, as pathetic as it is. We are seeing that absurd leap of irrationality from look at the trees to God done it, with nothing corroboratory in the middle at all. It doesn't matter how often you explain this to the religiously deluded, though, because they'll never be able to get it. God is just that made-up word that they've come up with to explain anything they don't personally understand or do not personally like. God represents ignorance. No surprise there.
The heavens declare the glory of God, the skies proclaim the work of his hands, as stated in Psalm chapter 19, verse 1.
We still don't care about your stupid book. You'd think, after getting their asses handed to them time and time and time again, that they'd start to think about their own abject failures, but they don't. So, out of curiosity, I went through a couple of his videos, and pretty much nobody watches them. He gets very few views at all and virtually no upvotes because, as I pointed out before, the actual watch ratios for most theist channels are just crap. People subscribe out of a bizarre compulsion to click buttons on other religious channels, but they have no interest in actually consuming the content. They don't support him. They don't care what he has to say. They just feel good clicking on that subscribe button, and then they ignore this guy completely. This is really, really common in religious circles. I don't really understand it, and if anybody thinks they do, please explain down in the comments, because at least as far as I'm concerned, that's really, really dumb.
Think about the human body, the way your heart beats without you thinking, the way a baby is formed in the womb.
All done completely naturally without the demonstrable interference of any god. Just because you really like the idea, that doesn't make it true. My heart beats the way that it does because that's how humans evolved. No gods required. We have naturalistic explanations for all of it, which the religious have to reject out of hand because they're more interested in how they feel than they do about reality at all. That's pathetic, and you can say, well, this is a small channel, he's doing the best that he can. But you can look at the really huge apologetic channels, and they're all doing the exact same thing. This is why I'm not afraid to look at nobodies, because they are just as representative of religious insanity as the big boys are. Mike Winger has 823,000 subscribers, and we know what an idiot he is. Now, is what this guy says any dumber than Mike Winger? It's a dumb off, and that's not exactly a good thing.
and the complexity of DNA. These are no accidents. These are intentional works of a loving creator.
That's your claim. Now, back it up. Of course, we know he won't be able to, and he won't even try because he doesn't care. So, what other topic would we ever let people get away with this crap in and not ask any questions? And the answer, of course, is none. So, why would we take religion seriously if we're not going to let anybody else get away with it? People need to stop doing this. One standard is all we need. Apply that one standard to absolutely everything, and you'll be fine. Anyone who can't or won't do that, they're an idiot. There's a lot of idiots out there, aren't there? And that's kind of sad.
Yet for many, that's not enough. They want something more, something spectacular, something undeniable.
Something evidentially supported, because that is the problem that the religious have. Because they are starting with the preconception of a God, something just made up for faith and fee-fees, and then they use that God as a get-out-of-reality free card. I don't want to get out of reality. I want to understand reality. If there is a God, I want to know it. And the only way to know anything is through evidence. No evidence, no knowledge. But since the religious aren't looking for knowledge in the first place, they're after emotional comfort, they don't care about evidence at all. They just look around, see stuff they don't understand, and go, "God done it." But that's not how any of this works. God is worth believing in if, and only if, you can actually prove that God exists and not one instant before. Faith doesn't get you anywhere, and the religious can't get that through their heads. That's why they're not speaking the same language as rational people, because they are not rational people. Saying God done it doesn't mean God done it. It means that you're deluded out of your gourd, and that's not something to be proud of.
But here's the truth. No amount of evidence will convince a hardened heart that refuses to see.
And that's one of the biggest problems with the religious. Seriously, how many times have you seen this in your own interactions with the religious? Because I see it all the time. I have lots of evidence, but you won't believe me, so I'm not going to bother to present any. This is just a bald rationalization. It's an excuse. It's a lie that the religious make up because they know on some level that they've got absolutely nothing. They are terrified to find that their supposed evidence is just laughable, which, whenever someone mistakenly trots it out there, it absolutely is. But it sounds good to me. So what? Because as we've seen time and time again around here, just because you really like the idea, that doesn't make the idea true. You need to provide specific evidence that points directly to your claimed entity, and you aren't doing that. You're not even close. They get so far and then just leap to God done it without demonstrating that God exists at all. Not that they care, because really, why would they? I had a conversation recently with someone who said that a religious friend had challenged him to debunk his faith. Then I spelled out all the places this was going to go wrong, and he came back and he said, yep, that's exactly what happened. The second that you challenge their faith, or worse, suggest that their faith is wholly irrational, the conversation is over. They don't want to hear it. That's why you can't let them pull the standard blah, 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 ridiculous faith-based nonsense, therefore God. You've got to prove it in a way that I can objectively examine for myself, that I can look at your evidence and see if it actually stands up to critical evaluation. And sadly, for the religiously gullible, they've got nothing of any substance to present. Big surprise there.
The ultimate proof of God's love and existence isn't in the miracles we demand. It's in the miracle he already performed.
That you can't even prove happened. The more that we look at this, the less likely it looks to have ever happened at all. Of course, for the religious, They don't care, do they? They're running on pure fifis and faith, but that doesn't make any of it real. It doesn't matter what you really want to be true, only what you can demonstrate actually is, and the second that you bring faith into the picture, you've lost. Faith is embarrassing. It really is. But the religious, they're not running on reality. They don't care what's true in the real world. They are only after emotional comfort, and that is entirely irrelevant. They couldn't care less because, fifis. But that's why they're so laughably absurd. That's why it's so entertaining to watch two theists of different religions going after each other, because they're both doing exactly the same thing and coming to entirely different conclusions, and then demanding that their blind faith is far superior to the other guy's blind faith, while everyone around them is just laughing their asses off. My imaginary friend is better than your imaginary friend. Seriously, shut the fuck up. Because this just happened a couple days ago over on my BitChute channel, where one of my videos, I had one anti-Semite show up, and then another one who had a slightly different view. They started screaming at each other. These are two Jew haters who were screaming at each other because they didn't hate Jews in the same way. This kind of shit is really, really common. You people need to knock it off. You're just making yourself look like a fool, but that's all these people are, right?
God came down as a man in Jesus Christ. He walked this earth, healed the sick, raised the dead, and taught the truth of salvation.
That's your story. That doesn't make it true. That's why you need to provide evidence that any of it ever happened at all, and you can't do that. Sure, you'll just repeat the same emotionally comforting lies that you've had preached to you from the pulpit, but you can't dare dig deeper because it all falls apart under the slightest whiff of rational scrutiny. They have to come at it with all of the preconceptions that they've been brainwashed with from birth, or it all just disintegrates, and because they don't like it, after all, being wrong would make them sad, they simply can't accept that any of it could possibly be untrue because they're desperate for the comfort that it brings. That doesn't make any of it true, though, and that's why we ask the questions that we do, why we watch the words that come out of their mouths, because that betrays their absolute irrationality very clearly. You don't win debates with assertions. You need actual facts. And the religious don't have any, do they?
And when humanity rejected him, he willingly went to the cross to die for our sins.
Not so much. I mean, there's no evidence that any of it ever happened at all, but in the Bible, Jesus wasn't so much willing as he really had no choice in the matter, did he? He was arrested. He didn't go and turn himself in. He could have admitted all the charges before Pilate, which he didn't. He remained silent and asked cryptic questions to keep from being honest. When Pilate asked who he is, he could have said so clearly. Did he? No. He couldn't even carry his own cross to Golgotha. He needed help there too. Then, when he was nailed up on a stick, he whined about it. My God, why have you forsaken me? That's not something a willing volunteer does. So these people are not reading the same book that I am. In fact, I doubt they've ever read the Bible at all. This is just theistic story time. And that's just pathetic.
But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us, as stated in Romans chapter 5, verse 8.
But that's another thing, isn't it? God is responsible for the sins of humanity. It's not our fault, it's his. He created us this way, knowing full well what would happen if he did, and he did it anyhow. That's something you'll never get a Christian to admit to. They can't blame their imaginary father figure in the sky for any of his clear and demonstrable failures. Because if God wasn't such an asshole in the first place, there would be no reason to kill off Jesus. God could just say, okay, I guess I fucked up and all is forgiven, and then just move on. But that's not how this ridiculous nonsense works, is it? I am a better person than this God is. And so are you. So is everyone. God was completely incompetent or grossly evil. Take your pick. And you're bowing down to this moral monster? What the fuck is wrong with you?
What more do we need? What more could we ask for than a God who sacrificed himself for the very people who doubted him?
A, fundamentally better class of God? Because holy shit, God could hardly have been worse. This supposed all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving God knew that Eve was going to eat the apple and planted the tree in the garden to begin with. What are you, mental? So this is all set up from the start. He wanted man to be damned. There is no other explanation possible. Well, not unless you want to admit that your God rode the short bus. He's special, all right, but I don't think that's what you meant. Your God is an evil bastard who fucked humanity over for shits and giggles, and you're kissing this idiot's ass. I ask again, what the hell is wrong with you? Try to come up with a decent answer.
Yet even then some said, if you're really the Son of God, come down from the cross, as stated in Matthew chapter 27, verse 40.
Which should have been simple, but then again, Jesus is up there whining, right? He was about to have a bad weekend for your sins. Yeah, cry me a fucking river. Because that's really the point, isn't it? He couldn't come down if he wanted to. Other than doing some ridiculous card tricks, Jesus really wasn't that hot. He didn't have that many of his magical powers while he was on Earth. So they were right. Jesus was pointless, assuming that Jesus ever existed at all. Because that's really the thing. There is no evidence for Jesus. Every single theist that ever claims that Jesus is real, I challenge them to produce their evidence that backs any of it up, and all they can do is make excuses. Because there is none. I had one guy point to a 15-year-old video on YouTube that had both comments and ratings turned off. Yeah, that's not at all impressive. Do better.
Their hearts were blind to the greatest miracle happening right before their eyes.
Another empty claim. That's about all they've got, isn't it? They love to think that they have evidence, but when it comes right down to it, they've got absolutely nothing but claims. That's why this video is so ridiculous and why it's been so completely downvoted into oblivion. Because they've got nothing but their own irrationality. They don't care what's true. They just don't. That's why they have the absurd double standard for their religion that they don't have for anything else in their lives. Whereas I have the exact same standard for everything. No evidence equals no belief. That's how it should be for everyone. The second that you start introducing different standards based on your feelings and desires, you've betrayed your own irrationality. Tons of people do it, religious and otherwise, and it just makes them look like idiots. So, what do you think so far? Let me know down in the comments. I'm not really impressed, not that I really thought I would be. There is the shocking lack of anything remotely resembling objective evidence, and a whole lot of "my book says a thing," almost like he doesn't know what the non-religious are looking for, right? Of course, he doesn't because he doesn't care. The video is only being made for the already faithful because those are the people who might potentially benefit him. Unfortunately for him, he's completely getting his ass handed to him. Not that he actually cares because, fee-fees. So we'll be back next week to finish it out, and who knows, I guess it could get better. I wouldn't be holding my breath or anything, but who really knows at this point, right? The religious like to pretend that their imaginary friends don't owe anyone anything. Okay, then I don't owe them anything either, especially since there's no reason to think they even exist in the first place. Are we done now? Can we go? No? Okay, if you insist. Let's get back to the disaster already in progress. We're on the backside of a video by R. Moss, where he thinks God doesn't owe anyone proof that he's real. You should just believe it anyhow because, reasons. No, just no. The fact is, you people have mental problems and you don't know how to deal with actual reality. And you have no interest regardless. You just want everyone to be just like you are. Dumb and deluded. No thanks. Let's just get this done.
Here's a hard truth. God isn't in the business of performing for us.
That's a common claim. It doesn't mean it's valid, just that it's common, which is why I named these videos what I did. Sorry, but if God wants my worship or belief, then God had better be able to pony up some evidence. Otherwise, fuck God. This is where the religious are running not on fifis and faith, but on fear. They are terrified of their imaginary friend in the sky. It's in the Bible multiple times. Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding." So they're told to be terrified because if they don't kiss God's ass sufficiently, well, they're just going to get their asses smited. And I'm sorry, but I'm not afraid of your imaginary friend. I am not afraid that if I'm out in the woods, Bigfoot's going to get me. I don't run on fear. I run on facts. The religious seem to have a real problem with that, don't they? But that's their problem, not mine.
He's not some cosmic magician here to entertain us. He is God Almighty, sovereign and holy. He owes us nothing, yet he's already given us everything.
Not demonstrably. This is just another version of "my book says a thing." I don't care about your beliefs. I care what you can demonstrate with objective facts. You need evidence, and you have none. This is really why the religious aren't talking to us. They depend on prior commitment to blind faith and wishful thinking. Anyone who doesn't come at it from that perspective isn't likely to buy into their bullshit, and more important, isn't likely to give them any money. That's what it's always about. So all he has are empty claims, and that's never going to be good enough for me. Not that they care, because I'm not a brainless moron with a wallet willing to sit in the pews. At least not without convincing evidence that anything they believe is actually true, and sadly, they've really got none of that, do they?
It's not about what God has to prove to us. It's about what we owe him.
And without evidence that God is real, I don't owe him jack squat. This is all just claims, nothing substantive. Of course, he's relying on his viewers to already believe, and that's not something that you can rely on with YouTube. Anybody can watch your content and apparently laugh at it, given that at present, now that I'm writing the second part, he's up to 4 upvotes and 48 downvotes. I don't recall if I said that in my first part, but this is how most theists are anymore. Even the big names. The second you come out of your safe space where you're in control over who can see and who can't, the religious tend to die a death of 1,000 cuts. Nobody is taking any of this serious anymore, nor should they.
Our faith, our trust, and our obedience. Do you remember the story of Pharaoh in the book of Exodus?
You mean that thing that didn't happen? Because we know there was never an Exodus at all. So yes, I remember your fantasy story in the Old Testament. So what? This is what happens when you lack the critical thinking skills to do your own research. It's what happens when you don't actually care about the truth. Scholarly consensus, and you know how little I care about that, concludes that the whole Exodus story is just nonsense. It was just made up about the time of the Babylonian captivity as a story that the Hebrews could point to and say, "See, God saved us then, he'll save us again." A lot of the supposed scriptures are just emotionally comforting stories told to people who really wanted to be special but never were, not even today. I have no idea why anybody would be impressed by this. None at all.
God performed miracle after miracle, plague after plague, and still Pharaoh's heart was hardened.
I think you mean hardened, but that's what you get for using AI generated subtitles. Or maybe he doesn't know what words mean. I don't know. It's really hard to say anymore. However, it wasn't Pharaoh's fault. Pharaoh wanted to let the Israelites go in his fantasy story. God just wouldn't let him. So God, once again, is just a dick. Not exactly a surprise. Of course, as I said, this is all just nonsense. It never happened at all. There are no records in Egypt pointing to this supposed event. There's one that has been wrongly interpreted as support, but it demonstrably refers to something else entirely different and is mostly poetic anyhow. Not that the religious tend to care, because they're only after the comfort of irrational lies. They couldn't care less about the truth.
That's the danger of living in a state of prove it, God. Even when God does move, many will still find a reason not to believe.
And there he goes, making excuses for his irrational beliefs. A lot of them do that, if you notice. They really wish that everyone was just like they are, but when that turns out to be false, as it usually does, they have to explain away the theological problem, and they do that with irrational bald rationalizations. They can never be wrong, even if they are. They can never admit the problems with their own faith. So they just have to point fingers outward, as though it's a failure with other people, just because they have no grasp on objective reality. They just really want it all to be true. But that doesn't mean anything, does it?
The issue isn't a lack of evidence, it's a lack of humility.
No, it's actually a lack of stupidity. They are counting on everyone being just as dumb as they are, being as gullible as they are. When an ever-increasing number of us aren't, they have to find a way to explain it away to their followers, because we all know they can't be wrong, right? Just ask them. At least that's the story they keep telling themselves. The problem is they are wrong. Constantly. Ridiculously. Demonstrably. Their faith is not remotely defensible. Not that they care. They just really like it. But liking it, that is not nearly enough.
We need to humble ourselves and get rid of this entitled mindset.
Oh, I agree with you there. Because you notice how many theists pretend that everyone owes them something. Respect, power, money, you name it. Of course, they'll frame it in such a way that it's a direct insult to their imaginary friend if you don't kiss the ass of their church. Mostly that's kind of a Catholic thing, and I don't think this guy is Catholic, but the evangelical and fundamentalist idiots, they're right behind saying, give us power because we're special, because we're ordained by God. Granted, the religious are not alone in that. I keep seeing people whining about Christian nationalism, which granted is worth worrying about to some degree, but then they pretend that their own political parties, since they all do it, they're not after the exact same thing. They all want power and money so they can social engineer society and make everybody just like them. It's funny how blind these people are to their own hypocrisy, right? Well, not funny. What's the word? Let me think. Oh, right, disgusting.
God doesn't owe us anything, but we owe him everything. The Bible says, humble yourselves before the Lord and he will lift you up, as stated in James chapter 4, verse 10.
My book says a thing. I don't care. You'd have to demonstrate that the Bible was a worthwhile and factually defensible source of information first. And as we all know, they're not even trying to do that, are they? Why? Because they don't care. It's just, here's the thing that you have to follow because we say so. And they only say so because they tend to get more power, money, and influence if you do it, and less otherwise. So, damn it, you better do what they say or else. This is not at all impressive, which is why I don't respect any of them. I don't care what your book says. I don't care what your faith teaches. I care what you can back up with objectively verifiable evidence, and they've got none of that, do they? So if you're going to use faith at all, you've already failed. Stop making a fool of yourself because it's really not helping your cause.
When we lay down our pride, we begin to see the beauty and grace of God in every part of our lives.
Yeah, not so much. Because if you look at other religions that worship other gods, they're all saying pretty much the same thing, aren't they? Just coming to entirely different conclusions. There is no grace of God apparent. Certainly not that anyone has demonstrated to me. That's why leaping mindlessly to God done it doesn't get you anywhere. Now, this guy isn't even remotely trying to justify his beliefs. It sounds good to me is about as far as he's going to go, and this just proves that he's not speaking to skeptics and atheists. He's just trying to make everybody in his little echo chamber just like he is. Of course, the video title proclaims the evidence is all around us. But he hasn't presented any of it yet, has he? He's just making unjustifiable claims and proclaiming that his wishful thinking must be true because he really likes the idea. And that only proves what a dipshit he is, not that anyone should be surprised.
Faith isn't about sitting back and waiting for God to prove himself. It's about trusting him even when we don't see everything clearly.
It's about wishful thinking and an overactive fantasy life. This is why I ask the religious how they know the things that they claim to know. Knowledge requires a demonstrable basis in fact, not just fee-fees and faith, but let's be honest, that's all they've got. They really just want it to be true, and there's a word for that. Delusion. It is believing things for which you have no good reason to think are actually true, but you believe them anyhow. There is something seriously wrong with these people. And that's why Hebrews 11:1 defines faith as it does. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. It's nothing you can prove is actually true, just stuff you really like for emotional reasons, not intellectual ones. This proves just how gullible and stupid the religious really are. Faith is not a virtue. Faith is something that you should be embarrassed about. It just makes you look dumb. Knock it off.
Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we do not see.
You know, I think I heard that somewhere recently. Wonder where. Honestly, I didn't look ahead and figure out that's what he was going to say. We even use the same translation, the ESV in this case, and I'll use a variety of translations whenever it comes up, just to show I'm not trying to steer the conversation. This is not something that anyone ought to be proud of. It doesn't matter what you hope for. It matters what is actually so. It matters what you can prove. It doesn't matter how convinced you are or how convicted you are about the things you have no evidence of. It's the evidence that actually matters. This is the only place in the Bible where faith is directly defined, and it makes a complete fool of anyone who actually uses faith for anything. This isn't about your feelings, you moron. Reality doesn't care about your fee-fees. Geez, grow the hell up already. You're just making yourself look dumb.
As stated in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1. Think about it. You trust that car will start each morning you drive?
Because I have direct, demonstrable evidence that virtually every day in the past, it has started. I understand how cars work. I can prove that they work that way. Now try to prove that with your God. You're just making a fool of yourself.
That chair you sit on will hold you.
Same thing here. I know that chairs are built to hold weight. If it's a really old chair or it's damaged or something, I probably won't sit on it without testing it first because I can see that its integrity might be compromised. Why? Because I verify things that I am not certain of, something the religious virtually never do, at least when it comes to their faith. They just really want it to be true, and that just proves how stupid they are.
Why is it so hard to trust the God who gave you life?
Because there's no evidence that said God is actually real. There's no evidence that any magical sky fairy did anything. That's the problem. Whereas I verify things that I'm not certain of, you can't verify that any God exists in the first place. So why do you believe it again? Oh, right, because you're stupid. That's really how this works. I wouldn't try to stand on an invisible ladder that I just had to have faith in, because I'm not insane. Too bad these morons are, right?
Today, I challenge you to open your eyes and see God's proof all around you.
Like what? What is this proof? Because I don't think you know what these words mean. Just because it makes you feel all warm and fuzzy inside, that is not evidence for anything. It's actual evidence that you've got something seriously wrong with you upstairs, but that's about it. One standard, that's all anyone needs, but the religious can't deal with that. They have two. One for everything that they deal with in real life. They'd be checking the chairs too if they had any doubts. Then one entirely different standard for their imaginary friends, because those imaginary friends can't stand up to any kind of rational critical scrutiny. This is a you problem. You have issues. Don't come crying to me because you're out of your ever-loving mind. I have zero sympathy for that. You did it to yourself.
Look at the beauty of creation, the sacrifice of Jesus, and the fact that you're still here breathing and alive.
None of that gets you to any gods. There is no demonstrable creation. It doesn't matter if you really like the idea, that doesn't make the idea true. You can't even prove that Jesus existed, much less sacrificed anything. Your delusions just make you look dumb. And I'm here because the conditions are still right for me to be here. None of the important internal parts have stopped working yet. That's why I'm still around. It has nothing at all to do with your ridiculous delusions and everything to do with testable, verifiable biology. I know you're too dumb to figure that out, but come on, at least try.
Stop waiting for some big show and start seeing the miracles he's already done.
Like what? What can you prove your imaginary friend actually did? Not assert, not believe, not have faith in. Prove. Proving requires evidence. And the answer to that, of course, is nothing. We all know it, but you don't seem bright enough to figure it out on your own. That's why he's not talking to us. He's only yammering on to the religiously delusional. And what do they need any of this for? They already believe it. This is just another instance of thinking that everyone is automatically just like he is. Dumb and deluded. That's not something to be proud of. We are not dumb and deluded. We are expecting you to be better than you are. We have no interest whatsoever in your imaginary friend until you can prove that it actually exists with strong, objectively verifiable evidence to back it up. Not something that you just assert proves something to dumb people like you, but something that's actually testable. And you don't have anything like that. That's why you're getting your ass handed to you so badly all the fucking time.
The proof is there.
Where? Where is it? Point it out specifically, because this is where the religious fail so often. Look at the trees doesn't prove that any gods are real. They are irrationally leaping to conclusions that they cannot back up evidentially. That's why you have to be so careful with the religious. Watch for that irrational leap to God done it. You actually have to show that the God is real and demonstrably did anything, and you can't do that. I was watching one of those call-in shows. I think it was Logic or something. And two theists called in, got completely schooled, and the second it became obvious that they couldn't win, they just started saying, well, I've got to go now. Why would you get on the phone and call a show if you had something else to do? Explain that one for me if you would. No, it was to save face because they were getting trashed. This is insanely common with the religious. They're always looking for a quick exit stage right when things don't go their way. Because these people are just idiots. It's really sad.
You just have to humble yourself and look. Let us in with a prayer.
Yeah, let's not. Oh, I'll be fair and I'll let him get to it, probably fast forwarding. But talking to yourself, that doesn't mean anything. You need to prove the validity of your actions before I'm going to take any of it seriously. That's why he doesn't want to talk to people like me, because I'm not impressed with any of this. I expect evidence, and he doesn't have any. But I guess let's let the chipmunks out and put an end to this. Maybe he's got something to say after the exercise in stupidity. I don't know. Let's go find out.
Lord God, please forgive us our times we demand more from you, as if what you've done is enough. Thank you for the proof you've already given us from your creation, through your Son Jesus, and through your daily grace in our lives. Help us to humble ourselves, to trust in you, and see your presence in everything, Lord. Strengthen our faith, and guide us to live lives that honor you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Nope, guess not. This really was dumb. Not that we're really that surprised, because most of them are. I really want to find religious content that doesn't rely on already believing the unsupported crap that the religious insist on, but I guess that's probably too much to ask for, right? It shouldn't be, but the religious are delusional and really want to believe, even though they have nothing to show to validate their beliefs because they just don't care. This is about childish emotions, not adult intelligence. They don't care about reality one bit. They just really want it to be true. Yet belief without justification is empty, isn't it? How do you know the things that you pretend to know? How do you back it up to others? Look at the trees and then just stapling "God done it" on the end is just idiotic. You have just embarrassed yourself once again. Now, go back to the very beginning, tell us what about the trees means anything, and then provide the direct demonstrable causal link from the trees to this God thing that you're claiming is responsible. Do that, and maybe you won't look so dumb. They can't, of course. They have no interest in even trying, because this isn't about getting to the actual facts about reality. It's about blind fifis and faith. You are a complete lunatic. You prove it every single time you open your mouth. Granted, you won't agree, because the asylums are full of people who think that they're perfectly sane. You should probably check yourself into one. At least we won't have to listen to you yammer on incoherently, and wouldn't that be nice?